Welcome back. Well, the organisation My Vote Counts says it believes the ANC may be trying to evade accountability through its plans to change the Political Party Funding Act. Under the Act, political parties have to reveal who gives them more than 100,000 rand in donations. It also says parties have to send their accounts to the Electoral Commission. It monitors who's giving them money. In the past, there was absolutely no regulation at all. Now the ANC says it wants to increase that limit to 500,000 rand. Robin Pasensi is a researcher at My Vote Counts. Robin, good afternoon to you. What do you believe the ANC is trying to do here?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and thank you for having me on the show. Well, I think we are really going to speculate what we think the ANC is trying to get right here. But I think the obvious one is that they really have a cash flow problem and they are in desperate need of an injection of cash. They've made various claims throughout the year, particularly since the PPFA came into effect in 2021, that it is precisely the PPFA's fault that they are unable to raise funds, and also have laid the PPFA down as the problem for why they can't pay staff salaries as well. What I think is probably more the case is that they may have donors that are now running scared in the face of the transparency aspect that the PPFA is trying to bring to light. So if there has indeed been difficulty in the party receiving private funding donations from previous funders, then I think the question we must ask, and the party must be introspective about this as well, is what is the nature of the donors that we have that are giving us this kind of money that now apparently they no longer want to do that for us.
To put it another way, Robin, and to put it on quite a definitive way, why do people want to keep it a secret would be the obvious question.
Absolutely, and I think perhaps it's cynicism here, but I think it's more informed by what we have seen politically and what has come out of inquiries like the state capture inquiry, is that there seems to be a very clear link between influence and money, being able to buy how your government actually functions. And we see that kind of having taken place in South Africa before. And I think that is the issue that we have now with the PPFA, with funders, and with some funders just not wanting to be known or not wanting to make donations anymore because of this act.
What have we learnt about who funds these parties since the act came into force? And it's not just the ANC, it's also the DA.
Absolutely. I think in large measure it has confirmed what I would say are some gut feelings around what we think is happening in our politics. And I think with each disclosure, that seems quite apparent. And what those are is, number one, there are only a few political parties, with the exception of Action SA and I think the Patriotic Alliance, especially now that they have declared in this last quarter. There are only a few political parties, really the big ones, the dominant ones that are able to source funding on a regular basis. That's problematic for smaller parties who obviously don't have the same kind of clout or presence as the larger parties, and so they find it difficult to basically claim the same kind of market share as those larger parties. So that's an issue, and we've seen that come out with the PPFA. Secondly, is that there are also a very, very small group of funders who continue to fund political parties, and in fact the same political parties. We have seen the same group of funders continually funding these large parties, which is an issue. It means that the space hasn't really opened up for new donors, and we also see this in the take-up of the Multi-Party Democracy Fund, which received no donations in the last quarter.
So it's interesting because what you're talking about is a small group of people who have a lot of money who want to be able to spend it politically, backing political parties, and don't want us to know about it. I mean, maybe I've been in this game for too long, maybe that's too cynical a reading, but I don't see how else to see it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would agree with you that perhaps from the outside it looks like a cynical assessment, but I think it does carry some truth to it. We must also remember that this is just a sliver of the funding information. This isn't even the entire picture. And it is a bit concerning that this does seem to be the trend, with the only outcome possibly being that you are hoping that your very, very large and consistent donations are in some way, number one, going to ensure obviously that this political party gets into national parliament and is able to make a change, but more specifically, the kind of changes or moves that they make is going to align with your own personal interest. And of course, that remains the very big issue.
So what happens if the limit is changed? If only people who gave R500,000 or more as individual donations had to be identified, what would we lose?
Well, essentially this very hard-won, albeit limited, transparency and accountability that we have, I think is just basically going to be shot. For example, previously the ANC have said they would perhaps like to increase the 100,000 Rand threshold for declaration to perhaps 500,000. Practically what that means is, if you look at the recent disclosures and the previous ones, more than 50% of those we just would not see. So we're talking about a large bit of information that will remain inaccessible to us. It will remain sort of secretive behind closed doors, and we won't be able to question anything. What this also means is that perhaps some of those funders who were afraid of making donations before, because now that will be made public, maybe now they will make those donations because the threshold for declaration has been increased, and they can still remain under the radar because now they still don't have to have their name be known. So I think the issue remains here is that this will basically take us back to a period where it's very difficult to get any kind of funding information about our political parties.
Robin, is one of the problems here. So in a democracy, voters should be able to make decisions, and they should be able to make decisions that actually change the course of the country. But here, if we just two or three of the bigger parties, so say the ANC, say the DA, which has also opposed reform from what we had, in other words, they weren't quite happy with the law that's in place at the moment either. So if the ANC and the DA were to team up, perhaps with the EFF, perhaps not, and they were to all work together to change the Act, there's really nothing voters could do, right? I mean, as voters, we'd be pretty much helpless.
That is the rather sad reality. The way that our political system operates is that obviously we are voting for a party who will appoint representatives who will eventually sit in Parliament, where we, of course, make and pass laws, amend them. We as voters ideally would believe that whomever is there as our representative is going to vote on my behalf. But if there is a particular political will to push a certain agenda, and even if we have sort of unlikely bedfellows like the DA and the ANC, for example, if they seem to come together on this point and they collaborate, and there is, as I say, enough political will and votes for it, then the ordinary voter's voice is going to be drowned out on that. I will say, though, that should this amendment actually go ahead, not just with the PPFA, but with any kind of legislation, whether new or about to be amended, there is a public participation process. And this is the part that is so crucial for MVC, I think particularly who's involved in this work, but also for ordinary voters. Because even if it seems as though the momentum of this thing is really going and we can't stop its inevitable end, we can most certainly, and we should, make our concerns known in that public participation process and try to intervene at every possible point in this legislative process to make it clear that we don't want it. Of course, the other big thing is that you would try and have to use your vote for a different political party in hopes that if they were to be in Parliament, that they would vote and act on your behalf.
Robin Persensi, thank you, a researcher at My Vote Counts. Really appreciate the time.